at 10, Junior Wheel Inc. At Junior Wheel Inc., a motor vehicle parts manufacturing company located in Norton, Ohio, an employee tragically lost their life in 2001 due to an accident involving a robot on the assembly line. As the employee was cleaning up their work area at the end of their shift, they accidentally entered an area of the assembly line where the robots had not yet been deactivated. The robot, mistaking the employee for a machine that needed to be assembled, grabbed them by the neck and suffocated them by pinning them under a wheel rim. While not exactly the same, the idea of being pinned by a robot and suffocating seems like how I'd picture dying from a Springlock failure. Most of this list isn't going to be exact one-for-ones, of course, since Springlocks don't exist in the real world as they do in the games, but suffocation would probably be one of the ways you'd suffer the most if you didn't die instantly from all the robot parts. The Springlock failures from the games being where the mechanism in the suits that holds back the robot parts enough for a human to use it as a costume break and allow the endoskeleton and whatnot to go back to where they'd be in animatronic mode. We haven't seen a true proper Springlock endo, so we can't really be sure about where the parts would go, but if they didn't end up replacing your bones or organs and killing you instantly, I think suffocation would be a main factor behind the death, because I mean, there's gotta be a lot around that area. And at 9, William Afton. I'm pretty sure that we all know this story by now, alright? Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, and then once William discovered Remnant though, he started to spiral. He wanted to use it for fuel and to make his life truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lured the possessed animatronics to a back room that they couldn't access and dismantled them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly released the souls of the victims that he had claimed so long ago, and you know, they're ghost kids, so they scared him. He tried to scare them by fleeing into his spring bodysuit, which probably also made him feel more powerful, but his haste, coupled with the leaking in the room, because of course he didn't really care about the foundations of the place, causes the Springlock suit to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. Of course, because he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he went on to live that agonizing pain for 30 years, but you know what? He deserved it. And you can't say that this doesn't belong on the list, okay? As the only actual Springlock failure to be confirmed as game canon, some are probably going to consider this the only one that should have been on the list, but hey, I make the rules. In at 8, Robert Williams. Robert Williams was unfortunately the first human to be killed by a robot. Williams, who was an assembly line worker at Ford's plant in Flat Rock, Michigan, was killed on January 25, 1979 when he was gathering spare parts at a storage facility at the plant, alongside a robotic arm that was lifting the heavier items. Williams was killed after the arm of the robot hit him as he climbed up to a shelf to retrieve some casts, and ironically, the robot was supposed to be the one retrieving the casts, but it kept giving wrong information regarding the number of casts left on that shelf, forcing Williams to have to climb up to count them. A jury determined that Williams' death was caused by lax safety measures, including one that should have caused the robot to make warning sounds when around a human, and the victim's family was awarded $10 million in damages. And a number of recommendations were made about improving safety standards when humans were working alongside robots, so that's something at least. And at 7, Kenji Arata. Kenji Arata was thought to be the second person killed by a robot, but the first Japanese man to be killed by one when he died at a Kawasaki Heavy Industries factory in Akashi, Japan in 1981. He was trying to repair the robot at the time of the accident until the robot pinned him against another machine and killed him. Attempts to free Arata from the robot's grip were unsuccessful. The robot had been taken offline for repairs and was separated from the other robots at the factory by a wire mesh fence, and it was supposed to remain shut down whenever anyone opened the door and entered the confines of the fence. Arata had, for some unknown reason, or at least a reason only known to himself, jumped over the fence into the area, therefore not activating the shutdown mechanism. His body rubbed against the machine and inadvertently switched it on, which caused it to come to life and pin him against another machine, which, yeah, yikes. And at 6, Dallas police. On July 7, 2016, Micah Johnson carried out an attack in Dallas that resulted in the deaths of 5 police officers and injured 9 more officers and 2 civilians. The attack took place during a protest, and Johnson initially targeted 3 officers, killing them and wounding 3 more officers and 1 civilian. He then fled to El Centro College, where he attacked another officer before barricading himself inside and attacking some more. A standoff ensued, during which the police tried to negotiate with him, who threatened to set off explosives. The police offered him a choice to surrender or face the possibility of being confronted with force, and Johnson did not surrender. Thus, the police ultimately, using a robot equipped with a brick of C4, to get inside and, let's say, deal with the event. It did damage the robot though, but this marked the first time a police department in the US actually used a bomb-laden robot for reasons other than disarming a bomb. Yeah. Halfway through into number 5, Joshua Brown. Joshua Brown was the first person to be killed in a self-driving car accident. On May 7th of 2016, while driving a Tesla Model S through Williston, Florida, the car was unable to distinguish between an 18-wheel tractor trailer and the bright sky. As a result, the Tesla collided with the trailer, tearing off the roof of the car, and then crashed through 2 fences and a pole before coming to a stop. Tesla initially tried to deflect responsibility for the accident, pointing out that this was the first accident involving the Model S in 130 million miles of driving, which was below the industry average of 94 million miles, but Tesla also emphasized that the autopilot system was not perfect and required drivers to keep their hands on the steering wheel. However, investigations by the National Transport Safety Board revealed that Brown had his hands on the steering wheel for only 25 seconds out of the 37-minute trip, and neither he nor the autopilot applied the brakes. The airbags did not deploy until after the car had left the road and hit some trees, which I think is absolutely terrifying as well, but considering that the police found a micro SD card containing a Harry Potter movie at the accident scene, the driver of the truck claiming that Brown was watching a Harry Potter movie at the time of the accident, and 2 laptops being found in the car, this seems like more user error than a fault of the vehicle. And at 4, Devin. The story The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular, you know, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrived at their school, they tried to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time, Devin ends up growing jealous because of that, you know, since Kelsey has everything he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an attempt to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. To try to humble him, I guess? I don't know. Why do you know what a Springlock suit does? Like, do you just chill in it for like an hour or 2? I don't know. Why do you know about this? Either way, the plan goes horribly wrong, and after getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, and it causes the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic, pull on the ground, you know, all the grisly scenes that you'd expect from this. Devin and Mick then leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So, a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth and snap! Haha, the Springlocks fail again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing that the body in the suit had black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. That's the only other Springlock failure that we actually know happened, so yeah, I'm putting it on the list. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Lenco Inc. Lenco Inc. is a company which makes the plastic products for a number of industries, including the clear plastic cases used in the packaging of CDs. You know, CDs are those they're like Blu-ray discs that you would get your dad for Christmas, but for music and not as durable. And the case is the stuff that people were cutting up to make hologram projectors out of with their phones. You know, you just place it on the screen. Yeah. Unfortunately though, one of the robotic arms used in this manufacturing process killed an employee at the factory back in 2007. According to accident investigators, the arm of the robot malfunctioned and moved unexpectedly, striking a male worker in the head and ribs, causing severe blunt force trauma. It was reported that the employee survived for 2 weeks in the local hospital, but eventually succumbed to the serious injuries. My brain to draw crazy parallels between that and Crying Child from FNAF 4, who had severe head trauma and died of his injuries in the hospital later on, which sends a chill down my spine, because that's yikes. But ultimately, in at number 2, Ramji Lal. In 2015, a robot at the SKH Metals factory in Manesia, India, caused the death of a 24-year-old Ramji Lal, an employee at the factory. The robot, which was used to lift and weld metal parts together, accidentally stabbed Lal in the abdomen while he was attempting to adjust a mispositioned metal sheet. Lal was taken to the hospital after the accident, but he later died from internal bleeding caused by the crushed ribs and abdomen. Despite initial reports suggesting that Lal may have also been electrocuted, an autopsy found no evidence of this and was ultimately determined that he died from the injuries sustained in the accident with the robot. However, the police reportedly stood by the death by electrocution, which is odd, and is way too close to the cops from FNAF, ignoring just the animatronics being compared to human corpses, like it wasn't a thing. I don't know why they were doing that, but again, it's obviously not the same thing, but definitely some interesting parallels that at least my brain can see. You probably can't, but you know what, I'm weird. And finally, and at number 1, Anna Maria Vital. In 2009, a malfunctioning robot at Golden State Foods in Los Angeles resulted in the death of Anna Maria Vital, a 41-year-old employee at the company. Golden State Foods was a major supplier for McDonald's, reported that Vital had been attempting to remove a box that was stuck in the machinery on the factory floor when the accident occurred. After freeing the box, the robot grabbed her, causing severe crushing injuries. Despite efforts by her colleagues to free her, Vital's injuries were too severe and she passed away a few moments later. Given that this was a death at the hands of a robot, crushing someone, being grabbed by an animatronic, and related to a fast food chain, this was extremely, frighteningly similar, at least in my brain, to the stories that we see coming from the FNAF games, especially in regards to Elizabeth Afton, who gets grabbed and crushed by Baby at Circus Baby's Pizza World, which is basically FNAF's McDonald's. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm sorry that this is a weird list, and I know, but I'm not gonna do that intro. And at 10, Oerlikon. In 2007, 9 South African soldiers were killed and 14 were injured when an anti-aircraft weapon, the Oerlikon GDF-005, malfunctioned during a training exercise at the Army's Combat Training Center in Northern Cape. The weapon, which is capable of firing, targeting, and engaging hostiles without human intervention, and can even reload automatically, jammed and exploded before firing 250 rounds of high explosive 33mm rounds from its 2 barrels at the soldiers. It's believed that the accident may have been caused by either a software or mechanical failure, and according to Richard Young, CEO of a defense company, this type of malfunction is not uncommon, and he's witnessed similar incidents with automatic anti-aircraft weapons in the past. But fortunately, no one was killed in those instances. But if that's an issue, and not an uncommon one, maybe you should fix it. And at 9, Alvey machine. While working at a meatpacking plant in Greeley, Colorado, a construction worker met a tragic end while installing an access catwalk. One of the larger machines at the plant, the Alvey, which was used to move boxed meat from a higher conveyor belt to a lower one, had not been properly turned off while the contractor was working. The heavy arm of the robot knocked him off his feet, and he then fell 10 feet onto a conveyor belt below, where his head was crushed by heavy machinery him instantly, yet again with the head crushing. Jeez. Or as the accident report so eloquently puts it, quote, "The Alvey machine was not de-energized nor locked out, and employee number 1 wore no fall protection. While employee number 1 was connecting the platform to the catwalk adjacent to, in and around the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car of the Alvey machine, the car struck the construction worker. Employee number 1 fell approximately 10 feet, getting caught in the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car, and traveling under the car, which crushed employee number 1's head and killed him as the car reached its first resistance, that being the next angle iron joint of the car pathway." End quote. Gotta love the numbers. Jeez. In an unnamed man. In 2015, there was a tragic incident at a Volkswagen plant in Germany in which a man was killed by a robot. The victim was part of a team that was setting up the robot, which was responsible for picking up components and assembling them into car parts. The robot was normally kept in a cage, and it was while the man was working on it inside the cage, and that's when the incident occurred. According to reports, the robot grabbed the man and pinned him against some metal sheets, causing serious injuries. The man later died as a result of those injuries. In a statement, Volkswagen said that they believed the incident was caused by human error, and it's worth noting that another worker who was inside the cage with the victim at the time was not harmed, but they weren't really sure. Or at least, of course, they're gonna say it was human error. And at 7, the Wanda Holbrook. In March 2015, a robot at the Ventura Iona Mains plant in Michigan caused the death of Wanda Holbrook, a 57-year-old maintenance specialist who worked at the plant. The plant, which produced car parts, was divided into sections, with robots from one section supposedly unable to enter another. However, one robot did cross into a section where Wanda was working and picked up a trailer part, which it then dropped on her head, killing her instantly. The robot was attempting to load the trailer part onto a fixture that had already contained another trailer part, which should have been impossible, due to the fact that a fixture can only hold one trailer part at any given time. Wanda's husband William filed charges against the 5 companies involved in the production of the robot, and I'm pretty sure he won. But skull crushing, come on, that's too close. And its 6th mystery incident. Alright, so this one's actually FNAF. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This one comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Some interpreted this as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or multiple suits failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the 2 animatronics that have Springlock versions. However, there are multiple holes to this theory. Mostly the design of the shadow animatronics is not like the Springlock suits. Shadow Bonnie is very much modeled after Toy Bonnie, and Freddy is more like the Freddy or Golden Freddy from FNAF 1 and not like the Fredbear we see in FNAF 4. There are also people that say if this happened, then the robots would have been decommissioned, but as we've seen from this list and the last part, that wouldn't necessarily happen. And also, if you like what we're doing here, then firstly, seek help, but also, be sure you hit like and subscribe, because I yell about various video game series all the time, and yes, it is various ones now, we're not just doing FNAF, I promise. Halfway through into number 5, William Afton. Again. I say again, even though technically William was on the last list, and some may consider this the same thing, but I mean in the context of a part 2, it makes sense to say again. But anyway, could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It actually is possible, which explains why I say again. And it certainly appears like it could be the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Could he have been the victim of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, since we hear of the unfortunate incident at the sister location? Could it have been William? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time at least. But with William continuing to put the suit on afterwards, when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that this theory is unlikely, but it's still possible. William is a pretty dumb guy. I've said that a lot. In at 4, Volkswagen. A contractor at another Volkswagen production plant in Germany also died as a result of an incident involving a robot, according to the automaker. The incident occurred on a Monday at the plant in Bonneville, located 100 kilometers north of Frankfurt. The victim, a 22-year-old man, was part of a team that was setting up a stationary robot, and it grabbed and crushed him against a metal plate. According to Volkswagen spokesperson Heiko Hillwing, initial conclusions indicated that it was a human error that caused the incident, again, rather than a problem with the robot itself. But the robot, which can be programmed to perform various tasks in the assembly process, normally operates within a confined area at the plant, handling auto parts and manipulating them as well. Other people were there, but they weren't injured, so again, it's all up in the air. Getting close to the end of number 3, Sodesia Sterling Heights. On December 15th, 2012, an employee at Sodesia Sterling Heights, a US company that manufactures car parts, was killed while working inside a robot work cell. The 38-year-old male employee was inside the cell when the gates closed, and he was struck from behind by a transfer robot, which crushed his chest and back. The company, which specializes in producing heavier car parts such as chassis components, used powerful robot arms to lift and maneuver these parts around the plant. In this incident, the machine should have been powered down, but it moved unexpectedly and pinned the worker against the wire of the cage, causing the fatal injuries, which is unfortunate and really makes me question why we use robots at all. But ultimately, in number 2, robot surgeons. Robot-assisted surgery is a form of minimally invasive surgery that allows surgeons to perform complex procedures through small incisions or remotely using a computer console. I had one of these used on me when I was getting my appendix out. These robots have been hailed as a major advancement in 21st century medicine because they offer increased precision and control for the surgeon, which can lead to improved patient outcomes. However, it is important to note that like any medical procedure, robot-assisted surgery carries some risks. A study in the United States found that surgical robots may be linked to the deaths of 144 people between 2008 and 2013. The causes of these deaths varied, but included system errors that caused delays in the procedure and instances of machinery falling into patients' open wounds. Despite these risks, robot-assisted surgery is still widely used in the medical field because it offers many potential benefits to both patients and surgeons. For example, it can allow for less trauma to the patient during the surgery, faster recovery times, and less scarring. But overall, the use of surgical robots in the medical field is a complex issue that requires careful consideration for both the surgeon and the patient for, risks and benefits, and either way, it's up to you. And finally, in at number 1, Regina Elsa. In June 2016, 20-year-old Regina Elsa was killed in a robot-related accident just 2 weeks before her wedding. The incident occurred at Asian USA, a South Korean-owned plant in Caseta, Alabama that produced parts for Hyundai and Kia vehicles. On the day of the accident, Elsa and some co-workers were attempting to repair a faulty robot despite the fact that they weren't supposed to do so. They had tried to reach the maintenance department, but no one answered their calls, so they decided to fix the robot themselves, probably out of fear that they would get in trouble if the robot wasn't working. Unfortunately, the robot suddenly restarted and pushed Elsa against another machine, causing serious injuries. She was taken to the East Alabama Medical Center and airlifted to UAB Hospital, but she died the following morning. An investigation into the incident revealed that Asian USA had committed several safety violations in order to maximize profits, and in fact, the US Department of Labor had fined the company and two staffing agencies $2.7 million for 27 safety violations just 2 weeks before this incident. The inquiry also found that Asian USA overworked its employees and encouraged them to repair the faulty machines, which explains why they were doing it. And at 10, The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, cause you know, that's kinda serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pull around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And at 9, the Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. And at 8, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kinda gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life, and I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And it's 7 Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after the Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot, and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birth in hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because, like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through in at number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Fright's fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even fully like a flesh phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. And my real second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least one finger on his right hand, and is absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dromitivus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dromitivus animatronics list? Penultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So, in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his spring body suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the spring locks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years. And that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So, if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. In at 10, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists in Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on night 5 and is found by the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color, while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place, and the inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during the jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. I was going to make that a joke, but I actually wrote that into the script. Holy crap. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics are Springlock victims, which was confirmed to be false by Scott when he stated that William was a Springlock failure, but still, okay? On the museum level of Final Nights, which unlocks after night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the 2nd generation of Fredbear. In at 9, Shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and while they are from the main FNAF FNAF universe, this is a fan theory, so it counts. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple springlock suits failing at once, since the term springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole, and instead of the individual springlock mechanisms that are present within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous springlock failures could mean multiple of the springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the springlock suits, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have springlock versions, and while there are holes in this theory, this is, like, potentially the case. It's an idea at the very least. So yeah, shadow animatronics are fan springlock victims because it's not confirmed. That's how I made it work. And it ate Fredtrap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there actually are Fredbear versions of Springtrap, which is kind of cool, but I mean, kind of expected. Fredtrap is exactly what you would expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap for me. I mean, I don't know, I guess for some reason I think bears are scarier than rabbits. Don't know why I would think that. But I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of it, but that could also just be idle speculation. There's another theory that I have that maybe he was going to use the Fredbear animatronic, but then after his son got killed by it, he switched to Bonnie. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fredtrap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead kid. Yeah, so Fredbear is definitely one of the more strangely unique versions that I've seen for this list, and you know what? I'm pretty damn impressed. These designs are pretty good. And at 7, Shadow Spring Bonnie. Shadow Spring Bonnie is one of the two primary antagonists of Final Nights 2. He is one of the final animatronics in the game. Shadow Spring Bonnie resembles Springtrap, as to be expected when mentioning Springlock suits, but similar to Springtrap, he lacks the suit on his feet and has a majority of his right ear missing. Overall, he has rips, but not any real missing limbs or parts at all, which is a stark contrast to the burnt animatronics in the first 4 nights of this game. His face glows white, which is noticeable when he's in the hallway, but also gives him a more sinister appearance and pushes the something supernatural that most of the shadow animatronics have, like with Shadow Bonnie from FNAF AR. Shadow Spring Bonnie takes the role of Burnt Freddy and Burnt Foxy on night 5, which means that he's very fast, so the player needs to seal the vent quickly, otherwise you'll get jump scared. He also may appear in the hallway, but if he does, never use your flashlight, otherwise you'll get insta-killed. Instead, you need to inspect his face when he appears there, and if he's twitching, close the door. A rattling sound will be heard so that you know he's left. And the fact that you need to look at his face to see if you're in danger just makes this even scarier, especially considering the fact that most of what you need to do relies on fast reflexes, and then you're just sitting there trying to figure out if he's really twitching or if that's just you going crazy. Not from personal experience, I don't know. What? And at 6, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets, he's missing the exosuit on his right foot, and his character is holding a flesh-colored, at least colored, it's probably flesh-made, let's be honest, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or like blood tendril strands connecting to the side of his head, okay? It's horrifying. It's a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Yikes. This kid could have been the next best Fortnite player. Halfway through into number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is the primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awaken. Unlike the others though, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suits on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot. She is also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside her suit resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and overall her body is very slim like the original toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider, which is making me all sorts of confused. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. So yeah, not confused anymore. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother, tried spray on tan, still very pale. Why is this relatable to me? Why are these two, the two Springlock victims from Final Nights 3. So relatable. No matter what I'll do, I'm always gonna be pasty, and you know what, I'm okay with that. However, I did rank this above Grim Fredbear because it's Chica. And look at how they massacred my baby. Oh man, I'm sorry, mommy. These transgressions will not be accepted. In at 4, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear, and Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while someone is being killed outside. He's the predecessor to both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear, but Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities it really has to Freddy is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear, which I mean, I guess is the whole character. Am I Real's second form is the form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color, much like Springtrap does, and actually contains human remains. Great. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side, and there's a big hole that can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering, because you know, it has a corpse inside. His lower jaw is slanted and worn down. He doesn't have it's not circular like Cake Bear's. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso as well, revealing organs. He has rips and tears covering his arms, revealing more human remains, and he just appears to be missing like a finger on his right hand for whatever reason. And you know what? No matter what, it's still terrifying to look at. And of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus, okay? Because have you ever played Dormitibus? Have you seen these guys? They're terrifying. Just wait. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Stage Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity. But it's definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, so let's focus on that one. He is 100% the scariest animatronic in this series. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare Springtrap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kind of like Glitch Trap. And then, like the other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has one pair of hollow, dark eyes that will steal your soul. I added that last part, but it's probably true. In Final Nights 4, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths on his shoulders resembling fungi, and you know, a kind of a gooier appearance overall. It's like the slime girl from YouTube if she made a FNAF character. He's also missing half of his right ear like Springtrap in FNAF 3, and his suit is more greenish in color this time around to be more like Springtrap. And oh my god, this thing is still terrifying, and it's more terrifying than Springtrap, okay? This is what Springtrap should have been. Or honestly, this is what I think like a Nightmare Springtrap would look like, okay? This is like a prototype Burn Trap in my eyes, or the way I'm thinking, like Melt Trap, the next iteration of Afton. But ultimately, in at number 2, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, okay? Garvey is the penultimate antagonist in Dormitibus. As a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap. He was then burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, unlike our William Afton, but that's not only where he differs, because Garvey is more gooey, and he's a more gooey or gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. And it's also actually not William Afton, since this game was released before the official name reveal, even before FNAF 4. So yeah, he's Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you end up wanting to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon monkey from hell that even Satan doesn't want around, okay? He's like trying to like send it away. He's like, yeah, no, don't. Like, you're seeing pictures, okay? Like, tell me, do you think that it shouldn't be on this list, okay? Because if you're saying that, you're lying. I can tell. And finally, in at number 1, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game. The fan game, which if I say the name will spoil it, so if you want to avoid spoilers, just go to the bloopers, but like, thanks for watching. But either way, I'll give you the chance to do that. Okay, there we go. That was your chance. You're done. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018. And you know, since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's gonna be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different set of tasks each night and must complete said tasks before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of this game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all. I don't know about you, some of you I do because I've seen the comments, but I would rather not get Springlocked. It's also revealed that you are William Afton in this game, but you know what, it's you, so it's good enough for me. And at 10, William Afton, again. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible Springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about Springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the Springlock failure, or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNAF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNAF 6, so maybe for irony's sake Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, you know, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was. And at 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a spring locking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have spring locks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original Springlock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a Springlock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible Springlocking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple. Since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the Springlock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the Springlocks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended. Because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the Bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a Springlock victim. Halfway through into number 5, shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms that hold back all the robotic parts in the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the shadow animatronics came from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. And while there are holes in this theory, there is potential that this is the case. So the shadow animatronics are possible Springlock victims. I'm gonna have to keep saying that because people in the comments are gonna get mad. It's like, oh, they weren't Springlock, but they could have been. It's possible. And that's the list, okay? And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figured was a Springlock suit, that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. Getting close to the end into number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 1:35 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color is different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlocked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed. But no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility. And ultimately, in at number 2, missing children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since one knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't like snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me. Finally, and at number 1, crying child. Okay, now this one is going to be controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates in my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram not asking about my game's Kickstarter, but rather the Bite of 83 and how it had to have been a Springlocking bothers me to my core. I say this every time I'm bringing it up. I don't think that this was a Springlock failure. That being said, it's still possible, and that's what this list is about. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no Springlocks would have a chance of failing. Since, keep in mind, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanism failing to stay open, meaning it snaps back into animatronic mode. That's why it's bad if someone is inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanism in and around the mouth because it would always be in animatronic mode, since the jaw just moves up up and down. But nevertheless, it's still a possibility, since logic and physics doesn't seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're electromagnet, they would still be open with power, so if they ran out of power, they would end up closing. Just saying. And at 10, Elizabeth Afton. Elizabeth is at the top of this list because, well, she got killed, but she also doesn't really seem to deserve it until after she gets killed, and then she deserves the spring locking. Which, I mean, in a way makes sense, and it's something that I've been using as evidence when it comes to who I think the vengeful spirit is. Because, you know, spirits, when they're, you know, being spirits for longer periods of time, would understandably start to go crazy, or even crazier, and this is an idea that Supernatural, the show, has used in length. And the same idea, though, could be applying to Elizabeth and Crying Child. Just because you start off good or loving your father doesn't mean that you'll continue to see things that way in a few years' time. And Elizabeth, while not deserving a spring locking in 1983 when she dies, definitely deserves one come sister location in FNAF 6. I mean, she literally betrays her brother and sister location, nearly killing him, and then, again, she also betrayed him, and then in FNAF 6, she wants to make her father proud. Her murderous, psychopathic father. She wants to make him proud. Considering how you've been possessing an animatronic that he made that caused you to die, that he made, I think that you would have already made him pretty proud, I guess. It's a damn shame that you turned into this, but whatever. In at 9, Mr. Hippo. Okay, this is kind of a joke number, but also not, because Mr. Hippo is literally the worst thing ever in Ultimate Custom Night. Mr. Hippo is a viable animatronic from FNAF 6 that returns as an antagonist in Ultimate Custom Night. Okay, Mr. Hippo will climb through the duct systems trying to reach one of the 2 hoses in the office. Hoses? Is that right? I don't know. I just copied and pasted that line from the wiki. The player needs to use an audio lure to keep him in place and to move him around so that they can use the heater to push him back, and he is fooled 100% of the time by the audio lure. Also is fooled faster than Helpy Frog. However, most of the scare factor from this animatronic doesn't come from their behavior or their design. This time around, rather, their death lines. Cause you see, Mr. Hippo has a knack for going on about things. A lot. Okay, it's like me on a first date. Still, he will go into like 5-minute long speeches that you have to deal with every time he kills you. Meaning that if you get jump scared, you're boned for enough time to make a sandwich, okay? Which is annoying as hell. Getting killed by him enough will eventually and cause you to end up agreeing with me that he needs to be spring locked. Because you end up knowing what comes after the smoke of the jump scare clears, and it's just pain. In at 8, Roxy. Okay, I know that Roxy and Mr. Hippo are animatronics and incapable of actually feeling pain because of a spring locking, but honestly, I also just hate this kind of person. The self-centered toolbag who only cares about themselves, whether they secretly hate themselves or not, that's not what matters here, okay? Who you are and what kind of person you are is defined by how you treat others and who you are when the pressure is on. And Roxy is just horrible. And while they may not be able to feel pain from the spring locking, at least Roxy will be contained if they got spring locked, okay? And honestly, that's what I need. I don't want to deal with this personality type. I've dealt with enough people like this throughout my life, and I'm still only 22 goddamn years old, which means that I'm really fed up with this shit. So yeah, there's not much else to say with this one other than I want her to be restrained so that I don't have to deal with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the number. What are you still doing here? Go to the next one. And it's 7, Cassidy. Some say that Cassidy was spring locked, but honestly, there isn't really much evidence for that. But you know what? If she wasn't, she damn well deserves to be. And why, you ask? How could a little girl who got killed and then go on to possess the killer so he could suffer for all eternity deserve such a fate as a spring locking? Well, exactly for the reason you listed. Because everyone thinks that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, aka the one who possesses Afton to make him suffer. But when you look at it, logically, taking into consideration more than just what Matt Patton says, it would make more sense for Crying Child to be the vengeful spirit. But nobody wants to listen to me. Nobody wants to hear even my suggestions because of Cassidy. The amount of hate that I have gotten in the comments, in my DMs, on TikTok for God's sakes, is more than I have gotten for anything else. Even more than I got for suggesting that Michael was a Crying Child robot. Just because William didn't kill Crying Child directly does not mean that he couldn't possibly blame the man who made the robot and gave it enough power to crush a skull for his death. Because, you know, that wouldn't normally be required. Plus, Cassidy only has significance because you think she's the vengeful spirit. Take that away, and what importance does she have? Exactly. So, just for that, and for hardly anyone being willing to even hear me out, Cassidy damn well deserves it. Honestly, she could be higher on the list, but I wanted to rant about other people a little bit more. So yeah, there you go. In at 6, FNAF cops. The cops in the FNAF universe are absolutely the most moronic bunch of people I have ever, I guess, not seen but heard of, honestly. Like, yeah, I get that they couldn't catch William for story purposes, but that seemingly was retconned, since in the first game they said that they had made an arrest. They could have ended it right there. The story could have been over, but they couldn't find the bodies, so they let him go. Yeah, ignore the animatronics that smell like death, are leaking blood and other bodily fluids, and that many parents have compared to reanimated corpses. Those don't have anything to do with this scenario. Yeah, totally. And even when they find baby's blueprints and see that she has a child storage tank, they don't do anything more than question him. Quote, "There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those." Dude, arrest him! And search the bloody, rotten body smelling animatronics. God damn it, how hard is this? Okay, if it's a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, come on, if it's a crime scene, you don't need to have a warrant, for fuck's sakes, okay? They all deserve spring lockings for the sheer stupidity alone. I'm surprised that they didn't crawl into one and then get killed by it just because they're that damn stupid. Halfway through into number 5, William Afton. William is at number 5 because, well, he absolutely did deserve to be a Springlock victim, but he also actually was, and seemingly is the only one who actually was on this list. But, like, for real, this man deserved what he got in more ways than one. Seriously. He was a mass murderer who would have gotten a lethal injection anyway, but also the technician that made the suits, the man that handles the suit maintenance on the daily, and is absolutely explained to every single employee that has put one of these fuckers on the proper procedure for the Springlock suits. Mostly for tax and liability reasons, probably, okay? But including the Spring Bonnie suit that he uses to kill people, okay? Then he gets inside one without thinking and somehow doesn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling causing the spring locks that were active at this moment to fail and just fill him full of metal, okay? But like, it's your building, my guy. How are you not painfully aware of the leaking ceiling in this back room? Really? Like, how? How do you not know? Seriously, somehow, this lucky motherfucker managed to get possessed by someone that he killed who was so pissed at him that they kept him alive for all of his other supposed to be deaths. Because they wanted William to suffer. Like, god damn it. No matter who it is, whether you believe it was Crying Child or Cassidy, despite there being a more logical conclusion when you don't just blindly listen to MatPat, like, why? Why couldn't you just let him die? I get that you want him to suffer, okay, obviously. I mean, I put him on this list. I wanted him to be spring-locked. But like, doing that results in him killing more people. So why? Why would you do that? In it for Vanessa. I feel like this one is kind of obvious, and you may get mad at me for saying this, but Vanessa deserves to be spring-locked, man, okay? You're probably thinking, but she's possessed, you moron. She doesn't have control over her actions. But that's the thing. She does. Vanessa has no willpower to sacrifice herself for the greater good, okay? At this point, I think that it's safe to infer that Jeremy from FNAF VR didn't go crazy because he just saw Glitchtrap. It's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. Tape Girl hadn't broken Glitchtrap into the tapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way that it does with Vanessa, which would make sense, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about Glitchtrap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out like he had just taken like the Epsom salt because you use it in the bath. Maybe he did it to try and kill the monster that was inside of him, okay? So if Vanessa had the gall, Afton wouldn't really have a vessel, okay? Especially since the VR game at this point was probably abandoned. But she won't. But she won't do it. So she deserves to be spring-locked. Getting close to the end into number 3, Gregory. The way I see it, Gregory is such a stuck-up little shit that he would absolutely deserve to be crushed by metal robotic bits being put in the same place as his bones, because this kid is just a damn menace that seemingly doesn't want to take responsibility for any of his actions. And you know what? None of you hold him accountable either. Gregory orders the robots to disassemble Vanny. Quote, okay? Gregory being willing to kill Vanny is already pretty messed up, but while some would argue self-defense, this is not self-defense. Self-defense requires a reasonable amount of force to be used, okay? Tearing a person limb from limb is not reasonable force. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Springtrap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy, but again, he's also just setting fire to this thing all the time. So like, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing? And how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? Okay, this guy literally kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to a destroyed Freddy robot that they can remake. Dude, Vanny's literally bleeding out right next to you. I'm sure that her ribs are just splayed across the floor. Dude, couldn't you have just said like stop Vanny or restrain Vanny? Stop Vanny would have been the easiest one, not freaking disassemble. Okay, you're not panicking about literally anything else in this game. Okay, just say something that doesn't involve a human dying, for God's sakes, okay? Stop Vanny! Dude! And ultimately, in number 2, Henry. Yes, I'm going to continue the Henry hate train. Choo choo, get on board, motherfuckers, because despite how many people try and defend him, I will never stand down. I don't get what Henry's deal is, because he does not kill William at any point in the series, aside from trying to make it look like a fire did it. But William is already considered dead. How would you killing him make things suspicious? So why would you try to cover it up with a fire? For some reason, okay, he seems to be fine offing William's son when he gets the chance though. I mean, in both of the fires that Henry has set that we see, FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, Michael was there both times. And he didn't seem to care that Michael was in the building either time, okay? He doesn't even give Michael the opportunity to leave in FNAF 6 despite there having been a way out planned. Quote from Henry's final speech. "And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be." You have a feeling? What are you, the black eye frickin' peas? He assumes that we also want to die in these halls, but doesn't give us the chance to actually make that decision for ourselves. He just forces us to die, since he doesn't give us a way out. Okay? That's murder! Whether we wanted it or not. Okay, assisted suicide is still illegal in the majority of states, I'm pretty sure, okay? But even then, not giving us the choice, even just assuming that we want it, makes it a murder. Instead of like having the fire burn the building down, or having baby lob his head off, okay? He should have had to suffer a Springlock failure just so that he could see how easy it would have been just to off Afton directly instead of trying to do it like a coward. And finally, in at number 1, Michael Afton. Michael Afton absolutely, in my mind, deserves to have gotten Springlocked instead of simply burning in FNAF 6, okay? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy, going after his father, but in reality, Michael, to me, he's just playing the hero this whole time and not actually doing anything. He says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but even Oliver Queen did more than that, okay? He's not doing it because he's a good person. He's doing it because he feels bad and not because of, like, some higher moral code. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which I mean is understandable, but then that subsequently means that anything he does to try and like fix the things that his father did is just to make himself feel better about his own mistakes. Because in the end, nothing is gonna bring his little bro back, okay? And he doesn't even really have the stomach to actually stop his father once and for all. He says that he's going to come find him, but then when he does in FNAF 6, he doesn't burn down the place to stop him, okay? Henry does that. Henry is the only one who's actually willing to sack up and try to stop William, even if he does it in a cowardly way, okay? That just shows how not serious Michael is. And if he really wanted to make sure that William was dead, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn, or at least doesn't actually successfully get out of the building, so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother anymore, okay? Because he has the curse of knowledge, since he knows what his father was doing, and he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And you know what? That deserves a spring locking. That's right. I don't care how mad at you are at me in the comments, okay? I don't care. It's true, alright? It's Monday morning, I'm mad.